Hi everyone, my name is Jennifer and I have an Instagram called The Little Paper Bear Co. I posted a few posts about these wood slice ornaments I've made, which people have really enjoyed, and I wanted to share how I did it because I've had a few requests. This is not necessarily my idea. I think I saw the original idea about a year ago on Nicole Spore's YouTube channel about how you could use, regular stamps to stamp onto wood slices to make ornaments. So it's really cool, and I've been playing with it this season to give away as some gifts to family and things like that. So I'm going to show you how I do it. There's lots of ways you can do it and different things you can try, but this is what I've tried this season that I think has been successful. So if you do have any questions, feel free to ask. These are the two I've recently made that are really focused primarily on like Tim Holtz products and distress line products. This is one I made that was from the stamp set was the recent Stamp Timber collab with Simon Says Stamp, and I used Ideology with it. The back side I painted and then used a sentiment that I actually stamped from Colorado Craft Company and then painted over it because I'm not good at hand lettering. And then this is the one I'm going to kind of show you today. This is the Santa from, let me see. I'm just looking up the name. The Jolly Santa stamp set from Stampers Anonymous and Tim Holtz. And this was the first one I did this year, so I wasn't quite sure if it would work and what I wanted to do. And then I just layered some Ideology and different ephemera on the back with bells and different distress products. So this is kind of the stamp I'm going to show today. So if you have questions, just let me know and I'll do a few things differently, but this is what we're going to do today. All right, so the first thing you're going to need is you're just going to need like a wood slice ornament. Now I picked these up last year in bulk on sale at I think Michael's. You can find them in most like local craft stores. You can also find them online on Amazon. I do like to buy them in person so that I can really look at what they look like to see if there's any cracks in them. Some of them are darker than others. This I think is maybe birch wood. I'm not quite sure, but I like this one because it's pretty light and pretty even, so it's going to give me kind of a good stamp base, if that makes sense. I am also going to use my Misty today. It's really, really large, and so I can't get the whole thing in frame, but I'm actually going to use my Memory Misty, which is the largest size Misty that they have. You can use your smaller Misty if you want. I will tell you that it's not going to quite fit in the Misty, so I am going to take that risk and use my Misty to stamp. But if you feel more comfortable, you can certainly go traditional and put your stamp on a stamping block. You just may not get the best impression, but really for this process that may not matter to you. If you want it to look a little more distressed or vintage looking, it doesn't necessarily matter to me because I'm going to do some messy coloring and things like that. But I am going to use my Misty, and I'm going to use like I said, the Jolly Santa. I really like this Santa Claus. I think it came out maybe last year, but I really like the idea of just his face taking up the majority of that side of the ornament, like the one I made. I think it came out really well. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to place it kind of in the top corner of my Misty. And I have taken the foam out of my Misty to use because it is thicker. It's not, the door isn't going to close all the way on the Misty if you're familiar with using a Misty. So I did take the foam out. It's still not going to shut all the way, but it's going to shut enough to give me an impression. And if I keep it in this corner, I can hopefully double stamp if needed. If I don't get a good impression on the first go. I'm also going to be using Gina K Amalgam Black Ink today. I use this because it's really just good for watercolors, alcohol markers, colored pencils, and Gamsol. It's really good for anything. So what I'm going to do is I have my wood slice ornament. I don't prep it with any sort of surface, gesso, or anything like that beforehand, just because I don't need to, in my opinion, but you certainly can if you find that that's easier or if you want a different look. And then I'm just going to kind of place my Santa where I think he'll look good. try to get the ornament in the corner of the Misty in case I do need to stamp again. Then I'm going to close my door and pick up this foam cling mounted stamp. So you see it's on my Misty. You can't see it, but off to the side, I'm going to ink up my stamp really, really well with my amalgam black ink, because if I do only get one stamping because the wood ornament shifts or whatnot, I really want to try and get as much ink on there as possible the first go round. So I'm just really inking it up really well. And then I do have a presser tool that I'm going to use. Like, you can use like a hockey puck, or some people call it a chucky, but I'm going to use that to really press down and give it time to get into that wood, because wood is wood and not paper. I kind of give it a long time and put some decent pressure. Again, this may, I'm going to be honest, it may not be the best thing for your Misty. This is like, I have 3 Misties, I'll be honest. So this is the one I use the least, and I've kind of dedicated it to these types of things. So I'm not super concerned, and I haven't had any issues, but I did want to put that out there. So I'm going to carefully lift that up and see where I am, and see it's very, very light. So I really want to stamp it a few times. So I'm going to be careful not to move my ornament, my wood slice, and I'm going to go back in. And again, it's going to take a few times because it's wood and because it's on a Misty, on an uneven surface, if that makes sense. So again, this would be fine if that's the look you're going for. I do want it a little bit darker though. You could always go back in with, you know, a paint pen or something like that to kind of add some of that details back in. I'm pressing just pretty hard. We're getting there, but it's still pretty light. And again, I'll just kind of keep going until I like what it looks like. It's not going to be a perfect stamped image just because of the surface we're stamping on and how we're stamping. I'm gonna push really hard this time. See if I can get in. Sometimes I even really carefully like lift my Misty up. And I've done it with a wood block too, or excuse me, what do you call it? You know, an acrylic block, and just put my stamp on that. And see, I did shift it a little bit just there, but that's okay to me. Like, once I color him in, that's fine to me. So I'm actually going to leave it right there. And I'm going to put my Misty away. With doing this in the past, I did notice initially when I tried this last year that I used a different kind of ink, and I tried to use colored pencils and Gamsol, and my ink did bleed. So I am being careful. I'm going to go ahead and just heat set this for a few seconds. So mind my heat tool sound. And what I found with this one is because it's Santa Claus and there's a lot of white in this image, like his hat and his beard, I didn't really have success in using like a white colored pencil. And I didn't want to paint it because paint usually is opaque and would cover up the lines. So what I tried to use was the distressed crayons and the picket fence. And so then I just brought in multiple distress crayons to use, and really I'm just kind of going to use them with my fingers and have fun with it. It doesn't have to be perfect. That's not really the idea here. I also did use one of the new Tim Holtz watercolored pencils in Tattered Rose. That's just for his kind of face color here. And then we'll just kind of get into it. And again, I'm going to use my fingers. That was just easier because it's wood, and trying to like blend those pencils into the wood was easier just using my finger. So I'm going to start actually with the white, and I'm just going to scribble it on. and we'll move it around. So I know that I kind of want his, you know, hat to be white. Kind of like the brim fluffy part of his hat. And, you know, again, it's going to be messy. It's going to be imperfect, and that's okay. It doesn't necessarily bother me. I don't think I've ever given like a homemade gift to anyone and, you know, they said, well, you didn't color that perfectly. And if they have, well, you know, that's fine. So I'm also going to put some on like the fluffy part of his little hat up here. And then I have a cup of water over here. I'm literally just going to like dip my finger in it and kind of move the pigment around until I like, and I got some kind of on his mouth, but that's okay. Again, I don't care for it to be super perfect. I really want it to just look homemade and messy and artsy, and I don't know, I was just having fun. I really didn't have an idea as to whether or not this would work or not, but I'm really, really, really pleased with how this one came out. I really like him a lot, so we'll see if we can maybe replicate that. We'll see. So I'm just moving that pigment around, getting it to kind of move and dissolve a little bit. And it really does look better once you kind of get the rest of the color in there. And I'm sorry, I do have a sniffly nose. It's literally just like allergies. But if you hear me sniffling, I kind of want some more over here. And I did kind of double stamp my image, but that's okay. I can still kind of tell what is what. And if I cover over some of the lines, that's okay. Again, it really is just kind of like playing and finger painting a little bit. So I did try initially to see if like the watercolor woodless, or the watercolor pencils, the new ones, would work water soluble with this method, and they kind of just disappeared. But I didn't have a distressed crayon that was good for skin tone, so I did use this Tattered Rose watercolor pencil, and I really think it looks fine. It looks like skin to me. We'll add a little bit of pink distressed crayon for his cheeks, and I can add a little water over top the woodless pencil, but it kind of has a weird effect on the wood itself. On paper, obviously, it would act as it should, but because we're using this on actual wood, it doesn't behave the same, which again is to be expected. And I just realized I forgot to do his mustache, so let's do that. He's already, in my mind, taking shape, which is fun to see. I could do a little pencil on his lip. Again, I'm going real messy. I can't remember the color I used for his cheeks. I think it's Kitsch Flamingo, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to put a little, like, dab of pink in his cheeks and kind of blend that out again with some water in my finger. And you could use, you know, a paintbrush if you wanted. I just found this was easier. Maybe even a blending stump, like what you would use for Gamsol and colored pencils. And I did use Gamsol and colored pencils on this one. And I didn't know if Gamsol would work, but it does. So I may try and do a video on this as well, because you can obviously get a lot more detailed, a lot more precise with shading and different things if you're using colored pencils versus the crayons, which I wanted for this smaller image. So if you're interested in seeing that too, let me know and I can try and find some time to do that as well. So I'm kind of in a good place with his hat and stuff right now. I'm going to go in and add a little dab of red on his hat, and there is some holly and holly berries in there too, so we'll add some color there. These are the Distress crayons that are seasonal, so they have the mica in them, so they're a little shimmery. So this is Peppermint Stick, and I'm just gonna kind of, again, I kind of buggered my stamping, but this is kind of where that holly berries were. And again, I'm just dipping my fingers in some water, not a lot, just enough to get the pigment moving. And I also want to be careful because I got a little bit of red in my white, but that's okay. We'll just go back over it. It's totally fine. I was so scared for the longest time to, you know, play with any of these things because there's that fear of like, what if it's not good? Well, that's okay. That's how you learn. And also, I mean, these are wood slices. You could technically probably sand them and start over. So this doesn't quite look like leaves or holly anymore, but it kind of gives the illusion, which I'm fine with. I don't really mind. It doesn't bother me. So there's kind of our base for Santa. I am gonna add some blue around him, so like this one. He has like blue around the sides of him, kind of like sky. So I'm going to use just a little bit of speckled egg crayon, and then I might throw in some, one of the mica ones, Snow Flurries, just to add some shimmer in there. And these are really fun. I again, was scared to use this sort of stuff. And once you just start playing with it, it's okay. Like, just have fun with it. If it turns out really awful, well, then you know what to not do next time. But again, I don't really think that's matters. I could give this to my mom and she would be like, oh, that's great, thank you. And she would be happy to receive it because you put your, you know, your heart into it. I know that's corny, but it's true. So again, I'm just using my finger to break up that pigment, kind of blend it together. And I can go back and add layers and more color. Like, I didn't get kind of as close to his hat that I would want. So it is different when you're working on the wood slice than obviously on paper. So just be aware. But it's kind of freeing. Especially I find that sometimes doing these little things like an ornament or maybe a tag kind of frees you from the pressure of making something like a whole card or something like that, like having just a small canvas. And look, that came together so quickly. Now, when I made this one, I wanted to try something, and what I did is I actually covered the entire thing in like Versamark ink, and I added the Distress frosted crystal to it. I didn't know if it would work because I didn't know if it would just sink into the wood, but it's really hard to tell on camera, but it does give it kind of this just frosty look, which I really, really like, and kind of just gave it a little extra. Before I do that, I'm going to add a little more white in places just because I want to. I feel like there's some places that could have some more white, and you know, I don't know necessarily if this is white, but we'll add some more up here. Because I didn't get quite as good as impression on my black outline, I do feel like a little extra crayon here and there might look a little better, but there we go. So I'm just kind of touching up different areas. He's a really jolly guy. Okay, so let me cap my crayon there. So I'm kind of done with those. I am going to see if I can add the frosted crystal. So I'll show you how I did that. Let me find it. Okay, so what I have here is my ornament, and I'm going to add the frosted crystal to it. I'm just going to use my Versamark ink pad and press it into the ornament. My crayon is dry now. It's not going to like ruin my ink pad or anything. But if you're concerned about that, you could use maybe a different adhesive or whatnot. I'm just going to get a bunch of ink on there so it's nice and sticky. And then I have kind of a piece of paper that I'll funnel my frosted crystal into. So this is like a translucent embossing powder which creates, it says it creates a matte frosted texture. So that's kind of why I like it. It just adds like a subtle frostiness to it, which maybe that's obvious, but and then I'm gonna heat set it. First, let's funnel my frosted crystal back into my container here as best as possible. We'll just get that out of the way. And it is going to take a little bit because, one, my tool needs to heat up, but then I think just because the nature of doing it on wood, you can see that the powder starts to lose the translucent quality and becomes just frosty. I'm just slowly going around until I see that the powder has melted. It makes it kind of smell like wood now, which is kind of nice. So I don't know if you're able to see it on camera, but it just gives it kind of a subtle frosty glisten. And you certainly don't have to do this, but I kind of like it. It kind of just adds a little bit of extra. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and on this one, I'm going to paint the back of my ornament black. And then I'm going to stamp on a sentiment and then kind of paint over that sentiment so that I can kind of have a fake brush effect. So I'm going to use Distress paint in black soot, And I just have some off to the side here on my glass mat that I work on. So I'm just going to paint. And I've never done it with black soot. Black soot is a little more liquidy. So it may take more black soot than I might actually just pour some on. See if that would go faster. Because it's wood, it's soaking it up really, really fast. Yeah, that's what's happening. So because I'm painting on wood, it's soaking up the black soot super, super fast. So I'm just gonna try and work quickly. And you can use, you know, whatever. It doesn't matter. I'm just adding more paint to my mat. And I mixed in some of this folk art chalkboard paint. Just because that black soot was disappearing so fast, so I did kind of switch over to that. So just to be clear, I did switch over from the black soot distress paint to this folk art chalkboard paint, and that was literally just because the black soot was sinking into the wood so fast. So this is a little easier, but you could do whatever. You could just use ink, or you could use crayon again. Or you could leave it natural, which is what I've done on other ones. And again, I'm not striving for perfection. I really just want it to have a sort of nice look. I do need like a smaller brush, but that's okay. I am going to have to let this dry, but I might accelerate that with my heat tool just so that I can go ahead and stamp. It really doesn't take that long to dry, especially if you do kind of thin layers. So I'm going to leave that there. I've stuck my paintbrush in my cup of water. And let's go ahead and just help along the drying with my heat tool. Okay, so now my ornament's dry, my black paint is dry. I'm going to bring back my Misty and stamp my sentiment. So I'm going to use this sentiment from the Season's Greetings from Christmas Magic, just because I thought it would fit nice on like the size of ornament I had. I am being mindful about where the hole is because I want the sentiment to kind of be, you know, right side up. So I'm just placing that there. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stamp it. I'm going to stamp it in white pigment ink. And then I'm going to like paint over that. So I'm going to use just Hero Arts unicorn pigment ink. Press it down. This is just giving me my guide. So it's kind of a cheat or a hack. That's what I prefer to call it. If you aren't good with hand lettering, I'm not. You can just stamp it, and then you have a pretty good little image there. And really, you could leave it like that, which is where I may stop the video and, you know, not show the painting. But what I've done before is I've taken a small paintbrush and gone over this. You could always use like a thin paint pen too, and then decorate it however you want. Maybe add some ideology. I'm certainly going to add some like ribbon and maybe some beads. I didn't add any on this, but I did draw in some like little extra stars. Added jingle bells, an ideology. Forgot what these are called. The little like plaques. And I did that. I made this one with, I just added that picket fence crayon. That Tim Holtz has done that in videos before that you can see. So I may leave that here and just show you kind of what my plan is. But there's our front of our Santa. You could also add some glitter. You could add, you know, really whatever you want. But that's kind of how I easily start these projects and then kind of dress them up with little bits and bobs later on. So thank you guys for watching. I know this was rambling. This is the very first time I've ever done kind of a video showing my process. So I apologize if it was a little confusing or too long. But if you have questions about anything I did, please feel free to ask. I will finish this one off a little bit later and probably hang it on my tree. So thank you again. If you are interested in following my Instagram, it is, again, it's Little Paper Bear Co. And I may go ahead and just put this up on like a YouTube channel too, so it's easy to find. But if you have questions, just reach out to me and I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you again for watching. Have a good day.